All right, guys. Yo, welcome back to the Sobriety University podcast. First off, happy Mental Health Awareness Month. It is day one. And so we have an awesome guest that's going to talk to us a little bit about mental health and his journey behind it. So, Kurt, welcome to the channel, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. So, yeah, as always, guys, we just get right into it. As a reminder, if you have any questions and thoughts, drop them down below. And then if you haven't already, check out the Peer Network. It's Kurt's project here, and he's going to explain a little bit about it. But before we get into that, Kurt, I know when I think Danielle connected us, she was talking about addiction. You had some addiction stuff, and this is an addiction channel. So I'm curious what your experience has been around that and what got you into the mental health space.
Sure. Yeah. Put me on the spot like right away. But
Yep.
yeah, so I know. So, for me, this substance use and addiction, was kind of part of our family environment growing up. For me, it really started as a young age, hanging out with, we were in a big family, big extended family, and I had a lot of cousins, and we were all kind of the same age. And the cool thing was when we were little, 10, 11, 12 was the sneak beers at family functions, and it kind of just, and as we got a little older and we'd go do things with our dads and things like that, it was kind of not even looked down upon if we would have a beer, right? Or something like that. But for me, I realized quickly that it was like a performance enhancing drug for me. It was something where I always kind of growing up. I mean, I always had a lot of friends. I played sports, but I never really felt like I fit in. And I could get into that a little bit later, but I think a lot of that had to do with my dad struggled with alcoholism too. So I always had this kind of secret that I was hiding, and it always made me feel like I was walking on eggshells. And I found quickly that, genetics probably played a role in that too. But, if I drank and then eventually, started using drugs, I didn't have to feel uncomfortable, and I felt like I fit in. I felt like I was more social. All the positives that we think come along with it. When in the end, I mean, it's not that way, right? So my struggles started early. I managed to, graduate high school. I ended up going to college, somehow graduated, barely, got in a lot of trouble, in school, almost got kicked out a couple times, graduated, and had some legal issues my last term, and ultimately, got past those, and just had to commit that I wasn't going to go back to that state, anytime soon. And after that is when my addiction really picked up. So when I graduated college, I didn't have a job. I guess my generation, that was in 2007, and the economy wasn't the greatest. There was the financial crisis going on. So it was, I just had a lot of downtime, and that was not good for me. So it quickly progressed. And that's when I, landed in treatment for the first time, one of many times. And it just, I guess through my 20s and 30s, mostly the 20s, I had periods where I'd go to treatment, do well for a while, and just kind of repeat that cycle over and over. I'd get a year here and there, but eventually it kept progressing until I got to the point where abstinence was really the only option for me. And there were a lot of other substances in there, and I don't know if we want to dive into that later, but it was progressive for me. It wasn't just alcohol. It quickly progressed, and to the point where I was, had seizures from withdrawal. My liver was failing, just like kind of the worst of the worst, and it's kind of crazy. And the insanity that we know this is that even when facing those things, it still wasn't enough for me to stop at
Right.
that time, you know? Uh,
It's a
so hopefully
progressive
that gives you,
illness,
yeah,
as you
hopefully that gives
say.
you some background.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive into a little bit more of your story because I have some questions for sure. Uh, Looking at you now, you would never be able to tell that you used to be a drug addict or severely addicted to alcohol. You look healthy, you look
Mhm.
fit and stuff, and I think that's one of the blessings of getting clean is you get to kind of put yourself together. Like I look at my life more as like I'm an athlete. I mean, whatever that means, like not in an egoic sense, but I train and like live my life as if I'm getting ready for a performance for a sport. And I couldn't do that when I was using. So we have a very similar story too, where I as well, my dad had alcoholism, and he actually got clean before I was born, so that was a huge blessing. My first time using was again with my cousins at a family reunion. So
Yeah,
that's when I
right.
popped the cherry vet. And the cousins are the
Yeah,
greatest, right? You trust them. You're like, I've known you my whole
yeah.
life. Like, yeah, try a little weed, and it was just boom. So, what were some of the substances you were using besides alcohol?
So, I look back at this now and, after, because I kind of went the clinical route with school too, like later on, but, you know, it really started with marijuana, right? Smoking weed when I
Mm,
was young. It was like the first thing. And the crazy thing was with that, like it always made me paranoid, but I always did it, you know. It was like a daily thing for me. It was just it was weird. But then
mhm.
one of the things I look back on, and I'm sure some of maybe the audience can relate, is, I was prescribed ADHD medications in middle
Mm,
school. And, I quickly learned that those could be abused, and
mhm.
so that really started, I think, my progression into other substances like cocaine. Um,
Okay.
Cocaine was you know, cocaine and alcohol don't go well. They do go well together, and there's actually some science behind that.
Yeah.
But so those two were really the things I struggled with the most. But I was also prescribed benzodiazepines, like Xanax. And so it was just
Okay.
like mixing all these things and all the time. And it was like whatever I could get my hands on. And alcohol was kind of the
Gotcha.
constant that remained, throughout that whole period of time. And it's kind of like, alcohol is so socially acceptable, and even weed, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, that was a daily thing for me too, but uh, so socially acceptable that that was the one I had the attachment to the most. I just like couldn't seem to give it up, right? It was just
Yeah.
the hardest.
And I'm guessing that one
But
always led you to the other ones. Like you're like, it started with the drink.
it did, yeah. And with when you get into like stimulants and stuff, for me, if I was doing those, like I needed to have alcohol to kind
Mm,
of
mhm.
level level out, right? Like it was I couldn't do one without the other,
Okay.
basically. Now, as I kind of, as I moved forward kind of in my recovery journey, so the first time I went to treatment, I was 22. Um, and it was a short treatment. It didn't work well. It was like a 14-day program. I think I stayed 11
Okay.
days. Um, and then a couple years later, I went to one. That one was, prompted by a seizure. I was just really sick. It was jaundice. It was yellow, and went to a 90-day program. And that one was the first time I had like a year sobriety after that.
Okay.
So that really kind of planted the seeds. And, I didn't stay abstinent, from then on out, but
Gotcha.
that kind of laid the foundation for, years down the road when I really was ready to get help. But,
Okay.
um, yeah.
What was that moment where you're just like, all right, Kurt, I've had enough. Like, no more of this. No more of this.
You know, I think it was, it's a great question. And I don't know. I think it was really when my mental health, I felt like I wasn't in a good spot mentally. Um, And it wasn't so much the drinking, like I wasn't dying. I think at the time I had a fatty liver, which
Hmm.
is
Most do.
reversible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's reversible if you stop, right?
Yeah.
But to me, that wasn't as bad as it was before. So that wasn't it. But then, there were times when I think the depression, which was really caused by the alcohol, the depression and
Okay.
the anxiety. And it got to the
Mm.
point where, I just knew I didn't want to go on anymore.
Yeah.
I was just tired, man. Like I was just so
Right.
tired of fighting it. And it could have either went really bad, where
Wow.
I made a dumb choice, or I, decided to get some help. And I decided to get some help, and I was just done, and at that
Mhm.
time, Joel, like my dad, who I mentioned before, he was diagnosed with cirrhosis, and he he needed a liver transplant. And so, like, I was really involved in it's kind of ironic, helping him like get to certain requirements you got to meet to get that, and
Mm.
sobriety requirements and things like that. And I was real involved with that. And at the time I, was kind of sober. But I think seeing that and seeing how that ended, he ultimately passed away a couple years ago
Okay.
from it. But kind of seeing that was like an eye-opening experience where I knew I didn't want to go down that path. And
Yeah.
I have kids now, and it's like I never want to have them see that or go through
Mm.
that. You know,
Mhm.
um, so I don't. To answer your question, I don't know if it was one moment, right? I think it was the years of attempts and years of knowledge, and like years of picking up bits and pieces of information and working with different sponsors or it was just like a
Yeah.
culmination
Yeah.
of things.
Culmination. Yeah.
And so I tell that to people because it's not like a one and done for most, right? Like it
Mhm.
takes many times for a lot of people. And all those times you tried before are not really failed attempts. They're just really
Yeah.
kind of learning experiences if you can start to view them that way. And that's kind of how I view things now, is from a different perspective.
That's such a good mindset, and really like failing forward. I think a lot of people talk about it like that. Like some of the people I work with in terms of like content creation, they do that kind of mindset thing. And it's really important to reframe is that you're never failing. You're getting reference experience and stuff.
Yeah,
So
and it's truly like you said you're an athlete. It's like one of those things you got to practice. Like it doesn't
yeah.
I think a lot of people think like, oh, that person can just do that. And that's not my experience, right? Like that literally was like practicing and catching myself when I'm thinking shitty, like, going down a rabbit hole of negative thoughts, is like, wait a minute,
Yep.
I can change this, and just practicing it. And it feels weird, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not normal. It's not, at least for me, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so it's just really like practicing. It's like training a muscle, you just got to keep working at it.
Totally, man. That's such a good perspective for life in general, I think, especially in today's day and age, right? You open your Instagram and you just see successful people everywhere. Like how we made
Yeah.
$1 million. You're just like, man, I wish that was me. And you forget that they spent maybe 20, 10, 15, 20 years failing business after business after business. And they finally found the one that hit. And so that's a really good reminder that if you guys are watching out there, like, and you're struggling with the relapse, think of it as a journey to your destination of sobriety. Like it does take time. I didn't get sober my first time either. I wanted to and I tried and I made about a week and then my buddy came over and it's like, dude, let's smoke. And I'm just like, yep.
Yeah.
And off to the races. So I do want to
Yeah.
acknowledge you as well for being sober for your kids, because my dad was sober before I was born, and I wouldn't have gotten sober if it wasn't for him. When I was having my
That's
hard
great.
time, he was very supportive and he never pushed me to get into recovery. It just so happened that when the moment arose, he's like, why don't you try this out? It's very calm. Maybe check this out. And I was, that's what got me sober. So I think your kids
Well,
would
you
be
got yourself sober, yeah, but he was helpful, right? I mean,
yeah, in the program too.
yeah, yeah,
There's a culmination, right? That's
yeah.
the word of the
That's
day.
awesome.
Thanks, man.
And
So
with one other, can I just mention one
yeah,
thing?
oh please.
The Instagram thing. You know, I try to stay off social media, but it's hard, right? Like it's part
Yeah,
of a business. You know, if you run a
it's part
business
of the
or
business.
anything, it's just good to be involved. But a lot of the stuff that people post, like you mentioned, oh, this person's successful. You know, I feel like a lot of times we don't even know if that's true, right?
Um,
Some people for sure they are because we see them like outside of just social media. But
yeah,
you know, I used to kind of get trapped in that and see these people that say, "Oh, I have this business," and or they're selling something, and it's like, but wait, what is that person really built? Like, you can't. There's no like um, building, or there's no business really, right? They may just be selling something,
mhm,
um, and it's you know. So I just warn people like don't get caught up in that. I did it too. I
yeah,
still kind of do it, right? But
yeah,
not everything you see on there is reality, you know.
totally, yeah. And sometimes the most successful people, like once you get kind of some success, you don't really care to talk about it as much, I think, anymore. For me
Yeah.
anyway. Like I felt more successful when I was starting this YouTube channel than I probably do now. Just out of
Yeah,
ego.
because it's exciting, right? And it's like,
Yes,
oh, you're
yeah.
building something, and then it's like, then the reality of running a something is like it's hard, and you got to do it
Yes.
consistently, day in and day out, and the excitement of starting something new wears off, you know.
Right. Yes.
Um, and then, one thing I've noticed too, even like with what I do is, it was super exciting the first year and a half building something. No one knew we were building. It's kind of like it was quiet. I didn't tell anyone about it
Mhm.
because I didn't want to, you know what I mean? I just wanted to keep it
Yeah.
and then kind of launch it. But um, then you launch it and you're like, wait a minute, no one's signing up, like
Right.
what's going on? Like everyone, then I started talking to people like, oh, this is needed. And then
Mhm.
you're like, wait. And then it's like those times, which again kind of takes practice, is like when one door shuts, that's when I find the most motivation because I'm like, shit, man. Like, okay,
Mm.
that's not gonna work out.
Mhm.
Now I really got to start hustling to figure out the next thing. And I
Right.
mean, that's happened recently for me in like the last couple of
Okay.
weeks was, you know.
Oh wow.
Um,
With what project, if you don't mind sharing?
so the peer network, it's just, building a kind of a new model for mental health care with peer support. It's not new, it's been around, but really is what we offer is a peer support. It's a telehealth platform that
Yes.
offers peer support as a standalone service. So a
Mhm.
lot of times you see peer support integrated with like a residential treatment program or intensive outpatient program,
Okay.
something more kind of higher level of care. And we're
Okay.
we're not that. And so,
Gotcha.
but the industry's kind of moving in that direction. And so it's really just kind of, there's a phrase like kissing a lot of frogs. Like you have to just put yourself out there a lot,
Yeah.
and let
Okay.
people know like what this is. And then once people hear about it, they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Like we could
Yeah.
totally use this. But unless you're, out there pounding the pavement per se or networking with people, like those
Mhm.
opportunities just don't come. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
it's like having the consistency and you know, doing it every day when you don't feel like doing it sometimes because,
Mhm.
it's tough.
And especially in today's world, like it's the blessing and curse, I think, of the internet is that you can build everything off social media and stuff. But there's no one that but it's not like in the olden days where you can just have a business and then it just grows because it's a business. There's something
Mhm.
I think back in the day where like you could have a mom and pop shop or something like that, but now you really have to spend a few years to grow a brand, to really, like you said, generate that awareness through lots of content. I mean, I put out so many videos, and I don't do it for the I don't do it for the money, because it doesn't make really like makes like 20 bucks a
Yeah.
month maybe. So
Right.
that's not the purpose. So you really got to have that bigger vision of why you're doing it. And then yeah, there's some days where you're like, screw this, I don't want to do this. But just like, I think dating is a great example of that, where you just have to kiss a lot of frogs. Uh, hopefully we don't
Yeah.
get canceled for that statement, because
Yeah.
well, you said frogs for the meaning a date. No.
Is that,
Uh,
yeah, is that a negative word that we can't say?
probably. There's
We'll
frogs
see.
out there that are really sensitive about that.
Right. Yeah.
But I did for 2 years. I mean, I've gone out for like a couple years now, and just girl after girl, approach after approach, rejection after rejection, and you just kind of, and I keep, and you just learn to, like, stomach it, and then you realize you have to do that and get that experience to find that success
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah. The repetition. And to be honest,
Yeah.
man, like, you know, I don't know. I don't know where faith falls into. For me, I just look at that as like, hey, that's not meant to be in that person. If she's not interested, so be
Right.
it. Like,
Yes.
like
Yep.
her loss. And that
Her
kind of
loss.
goes back to the beginning, right? On
Yep.
how our perspective on things, that we train ourselves to think a certain way.
Yeah.
If I get rejected, or, like, there's been some big rejections, like running a business. Like, hey, we
Mm,
think maybe we could get a contract with X commercial insurance company. Well, in the beginning, it's like, oh, well, you're not big enough. Like, you don't have, okay, well, they're right, right? Like,
mhm.
instead of having my ego hurt, it's like, okay, they're right. How do I fix that? So next time,
Uh-huh.
in 6 months or a year from now, I can go back to that same organization and be like, hey, you know, remember what we were missing back then? Well, now we have X, Y, and Z in place. And
Right.
so it's just, it's easier said than done, but it
Yep.
really, if you just kind of practice that, um, it kind of becomes the go-to, and not
Yeah.
it becomes your automatic thought.
Yes, and it gives a lot of peace too, knowing that.
Mhm.
All right, I like what you were saying about rejection. The saying that really helped me is, rejection is God's protection. I don't personally do the Christianity thing, but I still use the word
Mhm.
God sometimes, and I've seen that so many times, right? Like, I've gotten to know, and then when a couple weeks later, I'm like, oh, thank God I got to know, because this would have
Yeah,
been a disaster. Yeah,
totally.
and
Yeah.
sometimes
And
you got to reject as well, and it's just like you sense something, and it's like, yeah, universe is always looking out for you if you're in the right, doing the right thing.
yeah, it's weird how it works, man. And like, usually if you ask for, or I can speak for just for myself, if I ask for, and I'm not like a practicing Catholic or anything, but I believe in God and I believe in Jesus, and I was raised Catholic, but
Hmm. Likewise.
but I feel like when those things happen, if I just like ask for like guidance or something, something usually pops up in my life that's like, okay, I feel like maybe that wasn't meant to be, and now
Hmm.
I have this thing.
Right.
And a great example, like, of for that for me was like recently, like I mean, I can't go into too many details, but like there was like a
Hmm.
really exciting opportunity where a company wanted to partner, or, do what, work with us on a big
Yeah.
level. And, I just couldn't give up. It didn't feel right at the time.
Mm.
Like,
Okay.
and so then the deal's off, right? It's a
Yeah.
no-go. And then, a day later, I'm like, wait, should I have, now I'm thinking, like, should I have
Right.
done that? And then, what I did, I reached out to people and I said, hey,
Mm.
people that work in the business world, and they're like, you know, it wasn't a good opportunity. Like, you don't know enough about X, Y, and Z. And then, sure enough, another thing pops up that
Yeah.
is just kind of reaffirming that, hey, you're on the right path, and maybe it's not the path
Mhm.
you thought, but things are going to work out, you know?
Absolutely, man. If I my guess is with your situation, what did they want to make you kind of like into a like a big company organization thing, like so you would lose kind of that anonymity of being a
No,
was
I
that
would have just like, I would have just had to give up, some of my company and, um, like a large equity portion. And,
okay?
and it wasn't just like, it just wasn't a great deal. And I had weird, I
Yeah,
just kind of had mixed emotions about it. Like, I
sure.
didn't necessarily feel good about it. And so, it could work out down the road if something changed, but, I just kind of going back to, I could have kind of felt down and been like, hey, did I, should I have done this? Should I have not? But
Mhm.
then it's, realizing that, hey, no one's going to do the work for you. So no matter what you chose to do, like, you got to keep moving forward. Like,
Gotta keep
there's
moving.
no other option, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And, yeah, so that's what I got to do.
I can relate that too much, man. Like maybe a few weeks ago now, close to a month ago, had a date set up. I talk about sober dating on the channel, and super psyched to you know to see her basically. A couple hours before the date, hey, my mom got in an accident. I'm at the hospital. The good old mom in the hospital, ICU. I was like, dang it, I was like ready to go. Just like you said, like I felt bombed, and my body's like, hey, I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna go explore some of this like other part of Mexico City. If you want to come, like yeah, like you said, you just keep going. You're like, yeah, I'll have some fun. Instantly, like in the like first 10 minutes we get there, I meet this gal, and just way more friendly, way more open. She spoke English, which the other one didn't, and she was super into like Korean people. And she really liked their culture, and I'm just like it was like the universe being like, here you go,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I was like, sweet. So we went out like next
Totally.
week. It's really fun. I'm just like, yeah. So like that's what it's all about. And so same with business too. You get those rejections, and then the next business opportunity comes around. You're like, oh, this is way better. And if I would have said yes to the last one, I wouldn't be available for this one. So
Yeah, and yeah, that's awesome. And see, it worked out, and hopefully it continues to work out with her if it's meant to be. But it's also too. I sometimes remind myself that it's just going to be part of, like, all the people that doubt you or doubt me, right? Like,
mhm.
when I succeed or you succeed or whoever succeeds, in my
Yeah,
head personally, I think, well, that's just going to be part of my story that I can
yeah,
tell, when it's all said and done. And I
right.
tell myself that. And I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and, there's some that, I pick up some of this stuff from, but, it's so true. You just gotta do it. Quit making excuses and being I don't want to say it. I don't want to get you
You-
canceled, but,
no, you could say it. Just quit being a
yeah,
pussy.
yeah, quit being a pussy and do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Nut up or shut up is a what movie is that?
Yep.
It's a Wolf Bear quote. It's part for the course, right? I don't know if you're a golfer or anything, but you to play the game, you got to play the game. And some people think they're going to play the game, but get to skip the parts of the game that aren't fun. I was kind of
Yeah.
like that for most of my life. That's why I got into drugs. I'm like, I don't want to face life. I want to have the easy route of pleasure 24/7. And getting sober was way harder than I think. Like it was difficult. Like just learning how to live again and create a life and learn how to generate income. It was tough. Like you got to play the game. Got to play the game if you want to win.
Yeah. And, for me, back to like the substance use, it starts out where it's easy and it's fun, right? But towards the end, man, it was really hard. I mean, it was, it consumed like every thought
Yeah.
and everything I did, because everything had to be planned around that. you know,
Yeah, right.
and you know, whether it's hiding it, getting it, doing it, you
Yeah.
know, like when am I going to get it? Am I going to go to this event or not? Because then I got to drive. Like there's just so much, and
Yeah.
it's no longer fun, you know. And
No.
it was miserable.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the easy life. It actually, you know, kind of made it a lot harder,
Mm.
just to function. It's crazy.
'Cause you're so right, Kurt. Because in real life, you kind of do that with work, right? Like in your family, like your work and your family, and not like in a weird way. It's like the same. It's like your drugs. Like you put that first, and everything revolves around that. But that's something where you nurture. Your life is going to get better. Versus the addiction, where you put all that time and energy, same amount of hours in a day you have when you're sober versus when you're not. That leads down to like terrible results and past and all that stuff. So getting sober,
Yeah.
you have to focus on stuff that you grow and like get results, like good results.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. I think, you know, I would get this question. So I worked as a therapist, like I went to back to school to get a master's in social work and
Nice.
to do like clinical therapy. And, you know, a lot of times people would, you know, one of the things I would tell people is like focus on the basics, right? Because most
Yeah.
of the people I saw were pretty stable. Like it was a private practice where, you know, they were self-pay, cash pay clients. And so they were functional and most had jobs and things. And I said, just focus on the basics, right? Sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And they're like, you know, a lot of the feedback I would get would be, well, exercise can become addicting too. And
Oh
I'm like,
gosh.
yeah. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, anything can become addicting, but what's the downside of exercise? Now, if you develop like an eating disorder or something like that, that's very dangerous, right? But
Yeah.
we're not talking about that. And it, you know, the excuse, I mean, you just made a good point where you nurture like those healthy habits. And for me, the weight room and exercise was like a
Oh,
huge
let's
part
go.
of my sobriety, you know. Like that's to this day. Every morning, you know, if I don't take my kids to school or if my wife does, I usually do. But I block my mornings so I can
Mhm.
work out. And if I have to have an early call with like our developers or something, then we have it at 6:30 in the morning, you know.
Okay. Sure.
So I have I mean now I'll only go in for 45 to 50 minutes. I used to be kind of
Gym
crazy
rat.
about it. And yeah, like too much. But I'm to the point now where I just kind of maintain where I'm at. And 45 minutes is built into my morning every morning,
Nice.
you know?
That's all you need too, 45 minutes. That could be a
Yeah.
whole podcast of fitness, but
Right.
that's awesome, man. And it's really cool that you have that be a part of your life. And I mean, I can tell you're pretty jacked house. So if you would have told me you didn't lift, I'd be like, huh. So
Thanks.
you got that, you got that build, man. And all my friends, we're all lifters. We all love the gym. I'm an ectomorph, so I don't put on muscle really easily, but I'm lifting since I was 14. I'm just like a natural
Yeah.
skinny guy. My roommate, if you've seen, he's huge. He's like, yeah, 90 kilos of just shredded. So he, when I got to Mexico, he helped me put on about 20 pounds in about 3 months. And it was crazy.
Yeah. And
So,
if you think about it, right, it's just even if whatever the like if it's the weight room for this conversation, the context here, I mean, just by someone establishing like that habit that they're gonna do consistently on a daily basis, like just to take care of their and it doesn't have to be lifting, right? It
mhm,
could be walking or whatever. It could be yoga, it could be anything.
yep.
But by doing because most of the time when we start that, right, we don't want to do it. Like we don't feel like doing it every day. But now,
Mhm,
you know, you develop kind of that muscle memory where now you, at least for me, if I don't go, then I feel bad, you know? And so it shifts and then it's like doing the hard things when you don't feel like it. And then that hard thing that you didn't want to do, well, now, you've trained yourself to where if you don't do that hard thing, then you feel shitty, right? Because you should be doing that thing on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And that translates into every part of your life, for my life. Like that's the weight room was the start of me doing something I didn't want to do. And that's translated into every aspect of my life. If it's being a better dad, being a better husband, showing up, if I don't feel like showing up,
Right.
making a phone call when I don't feel like making a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
All those things. I truly believe for me personally, like it started with the discipline to show up in the weight room every day. But
Bro, let's go, baby. I love it. I'm fired. We'll have to do potentially another podcast where we can talk specifically on
yeah.
fitness if you're up to it. Because I
Uh-huh.
think, we're diving on a lot of streams here, and I think each one could be its own kind of separate thing. You got your
Sure.
mindset, you got your fitness and physical health. Um, One, it's just really good that you found that outlet for yourself. Were you
Mhm.
were you like a big guy before? Did you
Yeah.
get like chubby, or were you skinny guy? Like, what was your?
No, so when I was like when I was drinking, using, I mean, I probably weighed, 150 pounds and I was so weak. I remember when I went to treatment that second time I told you about, which was a 90-day program, we were there, I think the first 3 weeks you're in this like kind of, it's not a lockdown facility, but like you can't really go anywhere. You're kind of stuck in this building. And then
Mhm.
as you kind of move up in that program, they had these apartments in an apartment complex. And it was kind of like, I forget, it's like PHP, they call it. So partial hospitalization, where you like kind of live on your own with like a group of other guys in this apartment. They have a bunch of apartments in this complex. And granted, this was like 15 years ago. So,
Okay.
but we could go to the gym and they would take us to the gym. And I remember, because I was so sick from using, um, that I had trouble benching the bar, the 45-pound bar at that point.
Whoa. Oh my God.
Yeah, dude. Like it was bad. Okay. Now that was a long time ago, but
Yeah.
that's how thickly I was. And even, as I got older and continued to kind of drink and it progressed, um, I would just lose a lot of muscle. And, I was just kind of like, I wasn't fat.
Frail.
I was skinny. Yeah, frail, man. Great word. Frail and just didn't look healthy, you know?
Yeah.
But I was never a big guy. I'm still not that big. I'm like 190. I'm 6 foot, 190.
Get out. 190 is pretty jacked house. That's a you got that shredded look, I'm guessing, where you're like, it's like because if you're the big guys that are like 200 plus, they look like a 190 is like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
tough.
I would say I'm like just lanky in general. And then, I just, over the years put on some mass, and now it's, you get to the point where it's just kind of just like maintenance mode.
Yeah. That's exactly like my roommate. Like he doesn't to do another bulk cycle is just like it's so much work, and like you can injure yourself, especially when you get older. Like is at some point you have to just kind of accept your body and then just learn to maintain it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be 39 next week. So
Oh,
yeah,
happy birthday.
I don't push, I'm not in there like squatting a bunch of weight or anything. Yeah.
That lifting every week
Getting
PRs.
old. Yeah. Yeah.
550, let's go.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah. Hey, man, dude. That's awesome. Well, for this last portion of the podcast, I'm curious about the Pure Network. Like, let's dive into that a little bit. How did that
Yeah.
come
So
about? The whole
sure.
story.
Yeah. So the Pure Network, it's thepurenetwork.com. It's really just it's a telehealth platform that connects nationally certified peers to people struggling with mental health or substance use. So
Hmm.
I'll back up. So when I decided, I worked in the business world most of my career, I was a chef. We didn't talk about that, but I went to culinary school and kind of worked in that field and then switched to supply chain and technology. But as I got older, I really wanted to help other people in recovery. And so I had a friend of mine tell me about, I was like, what's like assuming I don't want to go back and get a master's degree, like at that point, like how do I get into the field where I can work somewhere, help other people? And he mentioned peer support. And I hadn't heard of it. I'd been in recovery. Um, Started looking into it. And so what I found is that certified peer specialists, peer support specialists, are people that have lived experience with substance use or mental health disorders.
Mm.
They're typically in long-term recovery, and they go through training and they get certified to provide support to people going through those same situations. So
Okay.
it's not clinical. It's not clinical in the sense it's not a therapist. They're not assessing or like diagnosing you with a mental health disorder or substance use
Yeah.
disorder. They're really there just to support in a non-clinical way, and they use like motivational interviewing and things, and just kind
Ooh,
of meet clients where they're at. And so,
love that.
so I became a peer support specialist and worked here in St. Louis for a organization that works a lot with like DUI court, drug court,
Okay.
family courts, and as a peer. And dude, I loved it. Like I had a lot of, I had a huge caseload because the organization just had a lot of clients. They had a lot of contracts with the state, and every time I would talk to one of my clients, um, and they realized that I was a peer, meaning that I in recovery, that I'm trained to like provide support to them. I'm
Yes.
not a counselor, a therapist, or psychiatrist. Like there's not this power dynamic, right?
Mm.
They would just open up to me and they would share a lot, and it just seemed like it was really helpful. And they would tell me how helpful it was. And I wasn't doing anything special. I think it was the power of working with somebody that understands firsthand what you're going through. I mean, the story may be a little different, uh, but there's shared experience there. And, I ended up going back to school and getting a master's in social work to become a therapist.
Mhm.
But I did that because the peer support roles, they don't pay well at all. I mean, like you can't
Uh,
support a family, um, you can't really make a career out of that. And that's
gotcha.
changing slowly.
Okay.
So I did some soul searching, and I wanted to provide a platform for peers to provide their services outside of those traditional like treatment settings, drug court, DUI court, and just to the general public, because I don't think people know about it. And while doing that, provide peers with an equitable wage, and we do that through technology because we don't have to have all this overhead and all these administrative roles of people that don't
Oh,
generate revenue, right? Like it's just the
right.
peer providing the service, and we pass that to the peer. Now we have
Okay.
to obviously run the business, and there's a lot of
You got
other.
to take a little out. Yeah.
Yeah, but still the whole focus was like to give them that opportunity and um create something kind of special that's new and that just focuses on peer support. And so we have this platform, we have a team of peers, we're growing. Um the good news is like commercial insurance is starting to, like when I
Mm.
say commercial insurance, I mean like, the insurance you get through your workplace or whatever.
Right.
Uh, and Medicaid, they're starting to reimburse for this service because they see the
Wow.
value.
Okay.
And there's a, I don't want to go too much into the research, but there's a ton of research around peer support. And, when peers are involved in someone that's struggling with those things, whether it's substance use or mental health, quality of life scores improve, anxiety and depression symptoms go down, engagement in treatment goes up, hospitalizations go down. health outcomes go up. Like
Mm.
there's all this research, right? And so,
Yeah.
it's just not the traditional clinical way. So we're kind of disruptive in that sense.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. We're a telehealth platform that allows anyone to come and meet with a nationally certified peer, which our whole team is nationally certified, just meaning they have a lot of work experience, right? And all the
Okay.
certifications behind it. And they're all in long-term recovery. So it's pretty cool.
Dude, I love that model, man. And I've never heard that. I didn't know a peer net support was different than like
Yeah.
therapy. Because when I saw your website, my first thought was, oh, this is a therapy thing. Um, and for me, the reason I left therapy myself was because I would come with these issues on mostly addiction related, and they didn't know what I was talking about, so they would reference
Yeah.
like the DSM, and I'm just like, same thing, man. Like I want somebody that's been through the grind, that knows what it's like to be on day 1, day 20, 30, 40, 100, and that they can walk me through that. Those are the people I resonate with. So I think that's so powerful.
Yeah. And it's not a replacement for clinical therapy, right? So just to be clear, some people do need to meet with a therapist and get a
Right.
diagnosis and maybe medication. Like we get all that. Like it could be peer support can be in conjunction with that, as kind of like an additional resource. But not everyone has a mental health diagnosis or
Yeah.
and even if they do, peer support is helpful in the sense if they're not willing to engage with like a therapist or a clinician or a psychiatrist. Peer support, the foundation of it's motivational interviewing,
Hmm.
and it really helps people navigate kind of the ambivalence about changing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times working with a peer, they may get motivated and they may talk through things and they may go see a doctor, right? And get
Right.
blood work done to see like how they're doing health. Like all those things, peer support can help with that. So it's not just that's the only option, right? It's just
Right.
it's such a it needs to be part of everyone's care that struggles with those issues. And I
Mhm.
think we're trying to build awareness with the general public, and this is great, like talking to you today, because hopefully maybe somebody hears this and looks it up or finds a
Yeah.
peer in their area or something. But um it's needed, and we're trying to fill a gap because there's not enough resources out there for people, you know.
Whenever I have a coaching call, the first one of the things they say is they go, I just want someone that knows what I'm going through. And
Mhm.
that's why I reached out to you. So in a sense, that's what Sobriety University is. It's a peer network as well of
Yeah.
being like, hey, like, we're here. I've gone through the grind. And I think a lot of people want that. And they don't know that it's available, that they're, because I went right into therapy as well, which I think, therapy changed my life for sure. And
Mhm.
knowing that there's something out there where you can get, it's more like a sponsor role, really. Like you become, you build that more intimate relationship, etc. Most of the people I've coached, we're like friends today. Like they
Yeah.
become legit peers. Like we do
Yeah.
business together, and it's just because they're all cool people. They just couldn't find that, someone to really relate to what they're going through, and then know that they can get out of it. I think that's what's so powerful as well about peer support, is that it's evidence that you can get to the other side.
Yeah. And yeah, there's sponsors, right? And there's peer support. And I just kind of want to make the distinction. So peer support, typically, I think people can use, like you see it in other industries too, not just kind of mental health too. There's peer support for other stuff.
Mm,
But um in the context of mental health and substance use, like our peers go through training, like they go through training on like confidentiality, ethics, boundaries, you know, um, motivational interviewing, and then they
mm.
have to go through like ongoing training annually to keep up with their
Yes.
continuing education credits to keep the certification. So it's almost like it's almost like it's a professional relationship, right? There's a
Professional
boundary
sport.
kind of, yeah,
Right.
kind of like a therapist. Like, most people aren't calling their therapist to hang out, right? You know,
That's true. I'm not peer
maybe
support,
some
guys,
are.
just so you know.
Yeah.
You're not coming to me
No,
for peer support.
I, and I didn't mean it in that way, Joel. I just want people to know that it's not just, so like if they went to our website, right? Everyone on there is like worked in the field kind of specifically for those things. And
Mhm.
that's what they've done, and they're trained, and like yeah, so they just, and a lot of times, like in the context of kind of what we do, we're
Mhm.
also trained in like understanding medications, like certain ones, like how they work with substance use. Like there's just a lot of stuff that goes into it specifically for like you know what I mean? Substance use or mental
Yeah.
health. It's just, um, and I will say this, a lot of our peers are like yoga instructors too, or like wellness coaches. Like they have other certifications too, man. So
Oh, okay. So,
yeah.
oh, that's very yeah, more I appreciate that distinction.
Yeah,
Seeing
no
that
worries.
there is definitely a difference there. Well, cool, man. So we're coming up to the end of the show here. Would love to do a follow up at some time with you if you're available. We can maybe talk
Yeah,
about some more deeper topics. We could maybe dive a little more into the peer network because we just kind of touched on it today,
sure.
and I think it's a great avenue. Guys, if you are looking for maybe that more professional support, I know I offer support as well through this channel. However, you might want something a little more, like Kurt said, where they're a bit more trained. I did do like some C-car recovery training as
Yeah,
well, so I'm
awesome.
certified in that. I probably should talk about that a little bit more. Anyway, um, yeah, I checked out your website, man. I think it's awesome. It looks like you can really quickly and easily find somebody to get help from, and you have a team of people, if I'm correct, that help you, help facilitate that.
Yeah, they do. And you get, anyone that goes there, they can check out like our peers' bios. They can book directly with that peer. We can even kind of match them if they reach out and they, are looking like, hey, who would be the best fit? We can do that. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just one pathway, right? Like there's no one size fits all.
Yeah,
This is a great resource, and it's affordable too. Like it's super affordable. It's
damn right
between
it is.
30 and $60 per session. And it's a great resource, and there's no commitment. You can meet once and be done with it. Most of
Mm,
our clients come back,
yeah,
and meet with the same person over and over. So that really builds that consistency and that ongoing professional relationship, just like you would in a therapeutic relationship. So
right. Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome, man.
just like your coaching, man. Saying yeah, like what you do, which is
Yeah.
great, and we need more people doing what you're doing as well.
Mm, appreciate that, man. Shout out to the
Yeah,
homies out there that came through coaching. I had a chat with
yeah,
one yesterday. We have like a weekly call and we just talk about, stuff not related to recovery. And I think that's one of the best parts of doing this work is you get to develop these relationships and you don't have to talk about addiction recovery forever.
yeah.
It it's boring.
Right. It does. It
Everyone's
gets
excited.
old. Yeah,
Yeah, right. I talk about life
yeah,
and business and relationships and eh,
exactly.
I think Kurt, I'll speak for both of us. I aim to help you get out of that, you know, cycle. So you can start having those experiences and live life a little bit to where you'll get to, in a very deep sense, lay before you pass, just look back at your life and be grateful that you had an awesome life. And that's
Yeah,
just so
and
important.
I will say this for anyone that may be struggling with those, whether it's substance use, or we'll just say substance use for this context. You know, and Joel, I'm sure you're the same way, maybe not, but as peers, we don't preach abstinence, right? Like we
Mm,
meet clients where they're at. I mean, harm reduction, quality of life, those are kind of like our key indicators. Like we want your life to be better. Understanding that for most people that struggle with those things, abstinence is probably the best option, right?
mm,
But we're not judging. Like we've all been there. We don't judge. Um, there's no stigma there. Um, So just know that. So if anyone's on the fence, whether it's you're thinking about reaching out to Joel, right? Or I don't know what your policy is, but it's not a requirement for you to be abstinent to meet with a peer. Like you could just be contemplating the change, right? Like,
Yep.
hey, I just wanted to talk through it. And that's where peers can be helpful too.
Yes.
So
Amen, brother. Well, guys, on that note, Kurt, if you can stay on a little after, just want to have a little wrap
sure.
up and talk to you a little bit. Guys, if you want to connect with Kurt, connect with the Peer Network, the link to his website will be in the description. You can check it out. Just have a look. Reach out if you have any questions. You can reach out to me, and I can connect you with Kurt. For myself, I do the Sobriety University. You're on this channel right now. For $25, you can get an intro call with me, a consult, and we can kind of dive in and see where you are on your journey and what you might need help with, where I can guide you, direct you. Maybe I direct you to Kurt. Who knows? I'm here to find what's best for you. So 40 minutes, we'll have 25. We'll have a call, and I'll get to find out who you are and what your story is. So you guys can also hit that in the main channel description on my main page, and then as well. Stay tuned for more podcasts coming up, for more addiction related content. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Adios. And thanks for coming on, Kurt. By the way,
Yeah.
to end with that.